and then a lot of other people. And now after 90s, there is a lot of collective, a lot of people are collecting in collective practice.
Process of opening our eyes to see the work of this, I suppose, collective, because in a sense collectives are formed also by the accidents of history. The sense of multiplication, the sense of multiplicity is not just a question of the numerical addition of beings or people. It's not just the fact that U and X and Y constitute multiplicities. The first thought I want to leave you with is that there are multiplicities even within ourselves, right?
Trying to think about how different individuals are coming together and what's the modality of this get together. In that sense, let me start from the difference between being social and being collective. We know that being social is more like being friendly. It's a kind of an affective virtue of having solidarity. But being collective is not that, it's something else. But does that mean that being collective is a little bit asocial, or to a certain extent it is antisocial? In fact, we have collectives in our history which were quite antisocial to an extent. For example, Dadaist collective, they are pulled into antisocial activities. You can say that. So collective has certain asocial aspects in that way. Like it cannot be trapped within the moralistic understanding of society.
एक इम्पोर्टेंट है कि कलेक्टिव्स के पीछे के मोटिव्स क्या हैं, उसके पीछे के इंटेंशंस क्या हैं.
I don't have any problem like Shamudro, how you say that there are terms like collective and groups and platforms. There are multiple terms flying here and there, but you earlier say that you don't have to always distinguish that okay, this is collective, so these people are excluded and these people are included. So you are making
collective, the contradiction within. If you don't allow contradictions to be there, it's not going to survive. And that is where I think you can do anything. Think about now, let me go directly to artists and collectives. I've seen artists talking about, and here also in these institutions, we talk about Kashmir a lot. I come from the same part, my research is about Kashmir. We talk about Kashmir every now and then. Artists do represent in their paintings and movies Kashmir. But the problem is, where is the Kashmiri? He's not there, she is not there. Neither are their experiences. And once you start talking on the behalf of somebody, you start representing somebody, that's where the problem comes. And that's where I think Anupam was pointing also. That this is the problem with collective. You are, think about this. I generally don't use this word, but I hate Indian liberals. Because they go on talking about n number of things. Caste tick, gender tick, Kashmir tick, Northeast tick. So this is how it works in these elite circles. But you ask them, do you have a Kashmiri to represent in your art collective? Do you have a Kashmiri who can say? Maybe he or she is rough. He doesn't have or she doesn't have that sophisticated language which you have. But allow him to speak, allow her to speak.
Actualization. You think there are actualization there. In fact, there are actualization. As the virtual objects remain outside. So I say that because we tend to, even though we want to, I'm not saying that you are, I'm implicating myself in it, because even though we are trying to move beyond the quantitative logic, the instrumental logic. Very often, we have no logic, certain sense to even counter. Very often we use this logic to counter something that we consider as reactionary. But again, I think we have to move a bit. I don't know how to move. Like you were saying, I know it's very difficult task. There is no way we can move, my will or my wish out of that kind of logic that we are in. At the same time, I must think this is something that is part of the.
I found it that you have checked. You are problematizing that in terms of agency, in terms of role division within the structure, or for example, something is happening just, but how to paint the names basically, right? And whose property is it? So in these terms, actually, I want to hear from others instead of saying myself. So I think we should continue.
Each other. I am part, as most of you know, of something called the Lux Media Collective. My comrade and partner in relations here, we've been doing this for 23 years. We fight every day for 23 years. And that question of argumentation, that question of a dissensus, of actually finding modes of being in disagreement, not just with others, but with oneself, and using that questioning to create the materials of our work. So if I look at this space that you have created, one of the first, or not just this space, but also at the corner of this work table, a kind of what I would call a memoir, an autobiography, a scrapbook, a novel, a long poem in words and pictures, this incredible, many-layered piece of work that I would encourage all of you to look at. What I find thinking about all of this is this question of excess. Where does one stop? Because for you, I know, Anupam, this is the question. Does the collective require us to think about drawing lines? Does it require us to think about drawing lines over and over again so that one creates a texture from a line, right? A line is just a collection of points that happen to be joined by contiguity. But when one draws lines upon lines, when one draws lines towards lines, one creates not just a matrix but also a texture. And I think what you, and also I must say the other works in this show, this lines of control bracketed by on two sides. So it's lines of uncontrolled, the unlines of control, or whatever it is that you're calling it. What I think that you successfully do in each instance and in each of the works is to create a sense of a world. So when I entered this space, I'm struck not by this kind of attention to one work, to one sensibility, but by thinking that here is an artist, because all of you are artists, creating the conditions for a reimagination of the entire world. Through an ability to deploy a kind of joyful, sometimes angry, sometimes playful, sometimes mad, because you are all of these things, excess that one can mobilize from one's self and the relationship of the self to the world. So you're, for instance, talking about the relationship between, which I know you've been fraught by, propaganda posters and your personal expression. I think that what's interesting right now is that some of the poster-like material that you are creating is infused by a deeply personal sensibility. And in that sense, there is a crossover that's beginning to happen between what you see as constituted political activity and the world of personal dreams, nightmares, hopes, desires. And if one looks at the most interesting kinds of art that redefines our sense of the political, not all of which is done by artists who call themselves political. Let's take for an example William Blake, an artist that I think is very underthought. A poet, as well as an artist, as well as in some ways a madman, who lived at a time of crisis in England between revolutions and counter-revolutionary regimes, and who constituted a world through his drawings which sometimes had this kind of mad intensity. He was drawing heaven and earth, the world, the universe, and the excesses of the king, and what peasants were fighting in relationship to that. You see that in the work also of, there are many quotations within